Hi everybody, Fran here at New Testament Explained. This video is the fourth video in a series of 7 that look at signs in the Gospel according to John. To make sure that you don't miss any of my videos in this series or any of my broader videos concerning the New Testament, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and the notification bell. This video is going to look at John chapter 6 verses 1 to 15, and this is where Jesus feeds the 5,000. As always, we're going to look at the context, the meaning and significance of this passage before finishing off with the overall message. In terms of context, the feeding of the 5,000 is a miracle that occurs in all 4 Gospels, and the accounts when compared against each other are quite similar. In this passage, the crowd sits on the grass and are fed with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And this miracle takes place in Galilee, near to the second Passover mentioned in the Gospel. This passage then begins by describing the location of Jesus, and what we see in verse 3 is Jesus go up onto a mountainside and to sit down with his disciples. Comparisons can be made between this verse and Moses going up Mount Sinai, and there are also similarities between this Gospel narrative and the Gospel according to Matthew, because in Matthew's version of the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus is depicted as the new Moses. However, scholars such as Dodd have said that this could just be the setting for the miracle and have read less into it. What we then get is verse 4, which tells us that the Jewish Passover festival was near, and this can be seen as important in terms of this sign because Passover remembered the time in the desert where the Israelites were provided with manna bread by God, and so the concept of bread can be seen as arising at this point in the narrative, but obviously being seen at later points in this sign. Moving on to the second section of this Bible passage, we get verse 9 where a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 fish arrives. This can be linked to Elisha's miracle of the feeding of the 100 men with a small number of barley loaves, and that account appears in 2 Kings chapter 4 verses 42 to 44. However, a difference between that passage and this passage is that this miracle is significantly more impressive. In verse 11, we get Jesus take the loaves, gives thanks and distributes the bread. The giving of thanks is part of the Passover, but we also get quite strong symbolism of the Eucharist here. The fact that it is Jesus who gives out the bread, the same way that we are going to see his body on the cross, it's quite significant that Jesus is the person giving thanks and distributing the bread. Again, remembering that John's Gospel doesn't have a Last Supper narrative, signs to the Eucharist can be drawn out in different areas of this Gospel, and the scholar Dodd does consider this sign to be symbolic of the Eucharist because it would remind the early church of the practice of giving bread in the Eucharist. Once the bread and fish have been distributed, what we see at the end is that there are 12 baskets full, and what this demonstrates is that the bread that Jesus gives is more than adequate and that there is plenty for all to join in the Messianic banquet. You can also see links to that concept of the Messianic banquet. Not only do we get symbolism in the fact that there is leftover food, but the number is also significant because there was also 12 tribes of Israel, and so the number 12 in this passage can also be considered symbolic. This passage ends with people saying, "Surely this is a prophet." And what this is, it's an example of where the crowd misunderstand Jesus' actions. They see him as a miracle worker, as a prophet, and they want to have him crowned king, which leads to Jesus withdrawing himself. And what is perhaps coming through here is that the crowd are concerned with their physical needs, similar to the Israelites in the wilderness, and what they're not understanding is the spiritual, deeper significance of what Jesus has done here. The overall message of the feeding of the 5,000 is that the bread offered by Jesus is the bread of life, and that those who believe in Jesus will never be spiritually empty. Jesus explains this in the discourse concerning the bread of life, and what you can do if you're studying Edexcel A-level religious studies is you can link this passage to the I am the bread of life saying. And if you've not seen my video on this, I will put a card so that a link to it appears on the screen just about now. That then ends my video on the feeding of the 5,000. As always, to make sure that you don't miss out on any videos in this broader series on signs in the Gospel according to John, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.